is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 584. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's a birthday boy. Happy birthday yesterday, Luis.
Thanks. I had a good birthday. It wasn't so different than a normal day here in the life, but it was still a good time.
Yeah, that probably says more about how good your day-to-day life is than anything else, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. Also that we don't really have that many different things we do these days.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, well, I hope you had a good day and had some nice meals there. We're going to celebrate your birthday by talking about Sealed Deck here on LR. That's right. We've got the big Arena Open coming up this weekend, and I know a lot of you listeners are going to be playing in it. We'll talk about some of the details about the tournament and the structure itself, but then, of course, we're going to talk about Sealed Deck itself in Kaldheim, how it works, and what you need to get an edge going into that tournament this weekend. Before we do, got to mention our sponsor. That's channelfireball.com. This place to go for really everything you need Magic related on the internet. You can buy, well, whatever you need. If you want to get Kaldheim, you can get it there. If you need singles for a deck, for say a commander deck or something, you can find them. Sealed product, as I mentioned, all of that. They have a cool new way to get sealed product as well, if you want to view it that way, which is, you can do box breaks. And, these are ways that you can buy basically portions of a booster box or even a pack, as I did, last week with a Legends pack, and then they'll open it on the air and you'll get assigned a color or a portion of the pack or the box or whatever, and you'll get those cards and they send them out to you. So you get this kind of cool experience with it where you get to ride along with them on the Box Breaks Twitch channel as they open them, and then you'll get some product out of it as well. And that way you don't have to commit to buying a whole box if you just want to get some cards in your hand. I'll put a link in the show notes to Box Breaks, but it's channelfireball.com/box breaks. Also, CFP Pro. Don't forget about that. Boy, Luis put up an article about Sealed a couple days ago, and these deep dives that you guys do on there, Luis, they are, we use the term premium content to mean, paid content these days, but I mean, this is like premium. Like, this stuff's really good you guys are doing over at CFP Pro.
Yeah, one of the things that I really liked about launching CFP Pro is because we're doing paid content, we have more resources to invest in that content, that naturally follows, right? And part of that is a real big emphasis on these deep dives, which is basically articles that take a decent amount longer to write than like a normal like deck guide sort of article. And we have, myself and other folks doing them where, the first one I did, I took a look at the Jeskai Luka deck, and I went through and it was like, here's how you should sequence your lands. Here is the stuff you want to look for in your opening hands. Here's how every matchup plays out, to this level of granularity where I was like, well, if you see this as their companion, here's what you should be worried about. Here's what you should prioritize in your opener. That's the sort of thing, the content that I really love making. And, CFP Pro is why we get to make that content. The deep dive on Sealed, I think, was really good. I even listed out what all the bombs for Sealed are, cards that overperform in Sealed, a lot of extra stuff that, if I was trying to get a shorter article done, it probably wouldn't have made the cut. So I would definitely recommend that you check out CFP Pro. You go to channelfireball.com/pro, because I really love the content we've been putting out. I stand behind it.
So there you go. If you want to get ahead, that's how you can do it. Now, if you do end up picking up anything over at Channel Fireball, if you'd use the affiliate code LR, I'd appreciate it. It helps out the show if you do so. Also, of course, if you want to help out the show directly, you can do so via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources for all the information there. Now, one of the things that you get as a patron is you get access to the main Patreon feed, which is where we interact with our most dedicated listeners there. And one of the things we do is we ask them for help. We ask for advice about show topics. We do Q&As where this is the primary place we go to get questions from our listeners, and those end up becoming either show topics or, in the case of our Q&A episodes, kind of mini show topics that we'll often go pretty deep on. And as well as that, you get access to the Patreon question of the week post, which will allow you to post a question, and we get to as many of those as we can as well. This one comes from the Memory Jar Podcast. It says, "Hey guys, Now that constructed resources has taken its place as the top of the resources podcast pantheon, wow. Have you considered trying to capitalize on its success, maybe changing the name of LR to constricted resources to get some of that sweet, sweet CR listener base? From David. Wow. When did this happen? I kind of missed this transition.
Yeah, I was unaware too, but BK's just got that magic touch. So
he really does, and to give BK all the credit. Thanks for the question, David. You relentless troll. But I will say that hey, if you are into constructed resources with Luis and Andrew Beckstrom, is really the place to go to get up to speed on what's going on with the latest and greatest in constructed. So take that. I went the high road on you, Memory Jar podcast. Okay. So let's get into our main topic. Oh, actually, let's not. Let's do a crack-a-pack and then we'll get into the main topic because Luis, you hear that? I have an actual booster
physical
pack in my hands.
Packs.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. My friend Adam, he wanted to do some Seal Deck over webcam. So he came and sent me some packs of Kaldheim to do that with. And, that means that I'm actually holding physical Magic cards and hold on. Oh, yeah, they smell good again. That's nice. That's really nice. I'm happy about that. Okay, so let's get into it. So, of course, this is going to come up in our seal discussion extensively, which is, we have to be very aware of what our snow lands are. Now, in this case, we got the absolute worst one. This is one of the dings on the sealed format is that snow-covered plains exists. It's just like such a brick every time you open one.
There are some splashable white cards, but yes, in general, snow-covered plains is a spectacularly weak snowland as far as snowlands go.
Yeah, but that is the one we got here. But we're pretending that we're in a draft, so it's all good. Stalwart Valkyries, our first common, that's 3/2 flyer. For 3 and a white, but you can pay 1 and a white for the alternate cost and exile a creature. Very solid common. So that's a fine start. Frostpeak Yeti. Boy, have you disappointed us. I mean, how much higher has Bergstrider gone and how much lower has Frostpeak Yeti gone since our opening introduction to the set? I mean, my God, this card is just like not even on my radar anymore.
No, Frostpeak Yeti just doesn't work. It just isn't the right size to compete in the format. And 4-mana 3/3s just fare really poorly in this format, especially since the activated ability is not particularly good. That said, I will note on a slight sealed note, I think playing 1 or 2 of these is passable in sealed just because the boards stall a little bit more.
That's true.
Still not good. Still not good.
I think another problem with it is that you only have so much snow, right? And sometimes it competes with something better. You'd rather activate your Pilfering Hawk. You'd rather be able to pump up your Troll, something like that. Demon Bolt. All right. Let's put these other crappers aside because we got a Demon Bolt. So there we go. That's a very good place to start. Death Knell Berserker is next. That's 1 and a black 2/2. And if it dies in its power sphere or greater, you make a 2/2 zombie. Card's fine, but nowhere near Demon Bolt. Snakeskin Veil. No. All right. Hey, we got some competition. There's a Feed the Serpent here as well. Now I'm currently in the Demon Bolt camp, even though Feed is more, comprehensive in its way to remove things, shall we say. But Demon Bolt is more efficient. It offers the flexibility of Foretell, and it's in a color that I tend to be a little more.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't even consider it competition. I think it is straight up wrong to take Feed the Serpent over Demon Bolt, where this isn't a color preference. Oh, if you like Feed the Serpent more, take it. You will lose more matches if you are taking Feed the Serpents over Demon Bolt. It's not close.
Okay.
It's not close, I think, mainly because of the fact that Demon Bolt is cheaper, more efficient, more splashable, and red is substantially better than black. All that added together means, though, you're completely right that in a normal set, the 3-mana deal 4 versus a 4-mana kill anything is the sort of thing where it just depends on the format which one you want to take more. Well, this format, you should take Demon Bolt more.
Yeah, it's just too splashable. It just has too much. Horizon Seeker. Fine card. There's a play pattern that's popped up, particularly in sealed, I've noticed, but it does happen in draft as well. Just play the Seeker and just jam it And then if there's a trade possible, and just be totally fine with trading it off for basically anything on the other side and getting your land. And in sealed deck, and we'll of course be getting into this, but, getting a snow land particularly out of your deck, that's a different color than the ones you have access to right now can be very, very strong. And in fact, worth the 5 mana. And I've even had people just jam their Horizon Seekers into my 4/4s just to get the land,
Yeah, I like Horizon Seeker. I tend to play it in draft too. The triumvirate of commons really is Demon Bolt, Serulf's Packmate, and Behold the Multiverse. Most people have Packmate 1. I actually think Behold's better, but you really can't go wrong with any of those 3, with the 2 card drawing one being slightly better than Demon Bolt. Mm-hmm. No other commons really compare to those 3.
Yeah, well, certainly not Horizon Seeker, right? Master Skald, we liked him or her more, but no. Tiscari Firewalker,
it's a solid
playable.
card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can play it. Giant Ox, no. All right, so this gets us to our uncommons. The first one out is Blood Sky Berserker. This is the 1 and a black 1/1, but when you cast your second spell, each turn it gets 2 counters and menace until end of turn. Look, it's a premium payoff for the black-white deck, but otherwise it kind of doesn't exist.
I believe this card is rancid. I just seen it go wrong too many times.
Yeah.
So I would generally not recommend you play this card or pick it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, in black-white, I want as many of those as I can get, but that's such a narrow thing. All right. I got one of your favorite cards here, Luis. I think I'm a little higher on it than you are, but it's like hard for me to express that I'm actually just a little higher on it than you are, which is Carter's Vicious Return. You are not a fan of this one, right?
This is another card I think is just awful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you should just not put this card in your deck. It's a really bad card. If you had like 3 Elderfang Disciples and your base red-black, sure, you could play the card. It's acceptable. But it's really not a good card. It will not lead to you winning. And in fact, I have downgraded the card every single time I've ever seen it cast.
It's true. Yeah, it is one of those cards that when it goes off perfectly, it can do some pretty powerful things, and you're definitely happy that you played it. But every other time when it does effectively nothing or doesn't do what you need it to do or costs you too much, I mean, there's a decent chance that it adds a pretty significant negative win percentage, which, like creatures can't really do that, right? Like things that can attack or block at least have some effect. By the way, this is the 2 black-red saga, the one that has you sack a creature and do 3 damage to a target. Then each player discards a card, and then you can return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a counter and haste. Yeah. So no, we're not, and it's not even near the ballpark of Demon Bolt. Next is Port of Carfell. That's the blue tap land, and it has 3 blue, black, tap and sack it to mill 4 cards, and then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Always play it in blue black.
Yeah, it's a card I like. I've splashed for a lot of these lands effects, quite frequently. But you really shouldn't be taking this one over Demon Bolt here.
Wow, we actually did it. We found a rare that we're going to take over Demon Bolt. It's Showdown of the Scalds. This is the 2 red-white saga. And when it ETBs, you exile the top 4 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you can play those cards. And chapters 2 and 3 are whenever you cast a spell this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control.
Yeah, Showdown of the Scalds is awesome.
It's sweet.
You don't really want to play it on turn 4 unless your curve's really low, but getting to play Showdown, effectively, draw 4 that you have to cast this turn and the rest of next turn, and then generate a bunch of +1/+1 counters for the 2 turns after, that is quite strong.
That's right. The real key is to make sure, if you play it on turn 5, don't play your land first. You exile, you get a land. You almost always hit a land off of 4. And then the next turn, if you hit another land drop, you'll have tons of mana to cast the other 2 or 3 cards, depending on what you've got left. And once you start casting the spells, if you have any board state whatsoever, they just start picking up counters and the thing gets completely out of hand. Additionally, it does there's chapter 3, which doesn't have to deal with the cards that you exiled, but any cards you happen to have left over also are going to throw a bunch of counters around. So it just gets completely out of hand. So I would definitely take Showdown of the Skulls. Also, I got to keep this pack together because this is actually part of my next sealed. So I got to figure out a way to splash that showdown and whatever else I open with it.
Yeah, I assumed you were going to keep the pack if it was good for sealed and then replace it if it was bad.
No, I only have 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be really, really hard up to do it. Okay. So let's get into our main topic here. The first thing that we want to cover before we get into the nitty gritty of actually building and playing your sealed pools and the things that you need to consider for that is the format of the tournament. Now, we had a discussion and some tweets and stuff go back with our friend of the show, Garrett Gardner, the G Guards on Twitter. And I'll put a link to Garrett's Twitter and some of these tweets in the show notes if you're interested in following him. And for longtime listeners of the show, will remember Garrett he helped us with some survey stuff that we did for LR, where we had our listeners answer some questions about stuff. He came up with all of that. He's kind of a stats guy. And what he did is he ran the numbers for a fundamental question that you're going to be faced with when you play the Arena Open this weekend, which is day 1. You can choose between playing best of 1 or best of 3, as we talked about on the show last week. Now, it's worth noting that day 2 is best of 3 only. You don't get a choice there. But for day 1, you have to choose. Now, as a Magic player, you're looking to optimize, right? That's what our brains are kind of tuned that way. So you're thinking probably along 2 axes. The first one is, well, what gives me the best chance of making it to day 2? But also, what's the best value? Because there are gem prizes for how well you do over the course of day 1. And so since each entry fee is pretty expensive, is 4,500 gems or whatever, that adds up pretty quickly, especially if you bonk out of a couple. And all of a sudden your weekend can be pretty pricey. So you want to make sure that you're getting the most back. So we're going to split this into 2 categories. The first one, of course, is going to be how likely is it that you make it to day 2? And the Cliff's Notes, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth, but the Cliff's Notes are that roughly speaking, best of 1 actually gives you around a 5% better chance to make day 2 than best of 3. Now that's really significant. 5% might not sound like a whole lot, but getting spotted a 5% better chance is huge. Yeah. So make no mistake that is something very, very, important. And if you're like Luis and I, right? Where, my focus is going to be not on getting back as many gems as I can, although I do care about it. But, that's my focus is trying to get to day 2. That means that I'm going to be playing best of 1, no matter what, on the first day. And the basic way it works is that Garrett went through and sort of did win percentages and 5% game win rates, as he calls them, in 5% increments. Those are a little bit different in the way that they play out in best of 1 versus best of 3. So you have to do a little bit of a conversion there because you are compounding it by playing a best of 3. But even after you do that, basically the way it works is like to get to about 50% win, 50% chance to get to day 2 if you're playing best of 3. Which remember, you have to go 4-0 to do that in those matches. You need to have about a 75% game win rate, as he calls it. But if you look at the best of 1 to get that same thing, it's actually somewhere in between 70 and 75. There's kind of a big jump there, but it could be as low as 70% that could actually get you across the line. And that gap is fairly consistent after you get a little bit above 50% win percentage and up to something like 80 or something that really most people aren't going to be able to get, anyway. So really for the meaty part of the curve, meaning say 55 to say 75 to 85% win percentage on the day, it is a 5% gap, roughly speaking, across the board. So I'm going to be playing best of 1, Luis. What are you thinking?
I'm probably going to play best of 3 because the gem EV is so much higher in best of 3 and I'm pretty greedy.
Okay. And that is a real thing. So let's mention that as well. So here's a shorthand way to kind of look at this. If you look at the queues as they stand right now on Arena, you can play best of 1, which gets you to 7 wins before your third loss, or you can play best of 3, which lets you play 3 matches, but you have to go 3-0 to get max prizes, right? So those, if you run the numbers, gem EV wise, are pretty well balanced. They're actually pretty close. There isn't one that is clearly better than the other that you just really, have to play one way or the other. It kind of leaves you the choice as a consumer to play the one that sounds better to you, or, if ranked is relevant to you, or that kind of stuff. But for this event, the best of 3 requires 4 wins to get the max prize, as it were, as far as gems go. Where in the other one, in the normal queues, it's only 3. So they've basically added a whole additional win in order to max out. Now, that might make you think, well, why would I do that if they're normally fairly equal and they're adding an entire extra match when I have to get? I'm not doing that. Well, they compensate you via gems. So this, how I was saying that the 5% gap is bigger than you might think it is because it doesn't sound big. Well, the gap in gem payout is absurd. It is well beyond 5%. In fact, it is so big that even if you win 100% of your games at the best of 1 level, you still cannot come out ahead on gems from day 1. You can't actually win gems. So if you play best of 3, however, you can actually profit quite nicely. You can get 2,500 in gem EV if you were to win 100% of your games and your matches in that case, I suppose. Another way to look at it is, you basically, if you win 50%, if you win 75% or anywhere in that gap, which is, I think, where, most of the really competitive players are going to be somewhere between 50 and 75% win rate. The gap starts out big and gets bigger as you go. So, this is not even close. If this is a big expenditure for you monetarily, if you're worried hey, I really need to try to get some of this back. If you are concerned about gems, you absolutely should play best of 3. It's not even close. Yeah.
And it's the sort of thing too, where I really enjoy sideboarding and the counterplay there. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's going to be a big part of day 2 because that is, that's how, the format works. Mm-hmm. I think it's good practice there, but if your main concern is making it to day 2, then it makes total sense to play best of 1.
Yeah, and it is, you have a little extra win rate to play with there that most of us don't. So you might be able to have your cake and eat it too. And then one other thing that Garrett mentioned that seems really important if you can pull it off is so you actually have 2 options for how you want to pay to enter the event. You can pay with gems, or you can pay with gold. And apparently the paying with gold is actually a huge discount. Garrett said that there's an established sort of rate of 100 gold equals about 15 gems, roughly speaking, as far as entry fees and stuff. So if you enter with the actually quite monumental 22,500 gold, that's the equivalent of entering with 3,375 gems, which, since it's 4,500 gems, that's saving 1,125 gems. So if you are one of those people who just sort of has let the gold accrue, or you have the ability to get your hands on a bit more if you're close, you should enter the event with your gold, as it's a significant discount, really big. It's about a quarter of the price.
Yeah, off. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So there you go. So now you're all set. Okay. So you're going to sit down. You're going to register for the thing. You're going to enter in gold. You're going to choose the queue that makes the sense for you. But now you got to play the matches. Now you got to build your decks. Now you got to get out those pools open. So that's where we're coming in now. So Luis, let's get into it.
I thought today we were just talking about the economics, and then we'll kind of let people figure it out. Well, we were going to go into the sealed details next week.
Oh, you want to do sealed next week? Yeah, that way we can have played the event, and we'll have a better feel for the.
We'll have practice.
Yeah, we'll have more practice. Yeah,
I actually know we've both been playing quite a bit of Sealed. Not only did I write that article for CFB, but like literally I ended my stream where I played 3 different Sealeds to record the show.
Yeah,
So.
and I think I'm somewhere between 15 and 20. I've done nothing but Sealed, and I've played a ton. So, yeah.
The Sealed format's good. I actually think this is a pretty strong Sealed format as far as Sealed formats go.
Okay. So what are the big picture points? What are some of the big takeaways we've got?
So the biggest thing here is this is the Sealed format where you most often play the same deck. Probably the most since maybe original Zendikar. I don't know how many like PTQs type events you were playing at original Zendikar.
I did play those. Yeah, I did.
Do you remember that the land station was always out of mountains and swamps?
Yeah,
and
I do remember
calling
that.
The judge?
I remember that. Yeah, totally. It was like Obnixilis. Yes, of course you have an Obnixilis. Yeah.
Some obscene part or portion of the format was playing black-red. Here, that deck is actually a lot better. It's some sort of like green-based 3 to 5 color snow deck. The reason I say that's better is all the black-red decks in Zendikar felt fairly similar because they were just trying to curve out and kill you with their efficient creatures. The 5-color snow decks tend to look like reasonably different to the point where it's actually, I think, pretty interesting. So you will be multicolor snow, I believe, about 2/3 of the time in the Sealed format. I don't know the exact percentage.
That sounds right to me. Yep.
That's my guess. And that means a lot of things. And there's a lot of reasons to get into that. The other decks you'll play, and we'll get into all those reasons. The other decks you'll play is a low curve aggro deck, most often, white or red based, one of the two. And you end up there when you can't build a really good snow deck because you just don't have the fixing or the cards or the payoffs or what have you, or B, you actually have the low drops to make this really good aggro deck. And the aggro decks can be really rewarding when everyone has 4 or 5 tap lands in their deck and they're taking turns off to like cast glittering snow or glittering frost and what have you. Like all that sort of thing, it really pays you off for being the aggro deck, right? You just have to make sure that you actually have the 2 drops for it. That's the really big motivating factor, because not enough low drops means you don't have an aggro deck. And then sometimes you're just 2 colors because you just opened 2 deep colors. That's where your bombs happen to be. Your fixing's not like spectacular, so you're just going to end up in a spot where you're just playing, black, green, good cards, elves, whatever, or like you're like blue, green, and you just don't end up splashing that much. And that's fine. But most of the time you're going to be snow. And you got to know how to build these snow decks. So
yeah, it's interesting too, because from a big picture, I think 2 of the best decks that I've had have actually been in those 2 latter categories. One of them was an aggro deck, and one of them was just a really good, I had one of those weird pools where like I had like 8 white cards or something, just one color just got basically left behind, and there all my other colors were like pumped up, and I made a 2-color deck that was really strong. So it is interesting. I don't know really which is best. It's not like it matters. You don't get to choose, but it is interesting to note that if you do have the options on a really strong 2-color deck, that might be superior even to these 3 to 5 color decks that we're going to talk about now, because they actually are kind of hard to make work. It's not free to have all these different colors flying around. It's feasible, and it's the best option.
So the first thing you want to check, well, first is your rares, right? Yep. That's always what everyone wants to look at first. Just look at your rares first. Yep. I've never been the type not to do that. They give you a pretty good idea of like what cards you're going to be trying to play, and ideally your bomb rares are cards that are A in deep colors or B easily splashable. The worst case scenario is when you have like really powerful cards that aren't easily splashable, because that can force you into an awkward decision point. But part of the reason to go these like 3 to 5 color snow decks is sometimes you just end up with a bunch of good rares across different colors, but you really do want to play them all because the rares are what would give you the best chance to win. These are the best cards in the format. And though I don't think this format is obnoxiously driven by rares, in Sealed, bombs matter more. The reason is you have 6 packs. You get 6 packs of rares that you get to keep. And we're talking about the cards that if you open them in draft, you never pass them, right? So in this particular way, the Sealed decks you open will be better than the draft decks. Where Sealed decks are worse is there's less synergy because you only have 6 packs instead of 24 when it comes to picking up synergy cards. But, when it comes to bombs, you actually get access to more of them.
Yeah. And also Sealed ends up being more bomb focused in the sense that people just, they play them, right? Like they're going to play all their removal and all their bombs if they can in any way get away with it. And sometimes when they can't.
The other thing to keep in mind is what's your fixing, and in this format, 5-color fixing is quite well supported. So we're talking first of all the duels. You get 6 snow lands plus Shimmerdrift Veil doesn't count towards that total. That's actually like low-key one of the best cards you can open in Sealed. You're just sitting there hoping to open Shimmerdrift Veil.
Yeah, you want those and as few snow planes as possible, basically.
Yes, I know that the snow planes tilt you badly.
It does. It gets me bad. Yep.
And then you look at your green-based fixing. So Glittering Frost, Path to the World Tree, Horizon Seeker. These are 3 different cards that fix all 5 colors. Path is the only uncommon too. And then Replicating Ring. This is the artifact for 3 mana that taps for any color, and it's a snow artifact. And after 8 turns, it makes 8 more rings, which is actually something that happens every now and then.
It really does. It actually matters. I had it happen to me when I had an Icehide Troll out, and I had an opponent have that happen when they had Starnheim Unleashed in their hand. They made 8 angels.
Yeah. So you'll look at this. Svella is also kind of a fixer. I mean, she's red and green. This is the one that makes manaliths. But first of all, you're always going to play a spell if you open Svella. It's one of the best cards in the format. Yep. Second, it actually does fix your mana for your other colors. It does. Mm-hmm. It does actually matter when you end up there.
Yeah, it makes replicating rings. What more do you want?
Yeah. So you look at your you look at your fixing, and if you end up in a pool that has, like, let's say a Shimmerdrift Veil, 2 other Snow Duels, a Glittering Frost, a Path to the World Tree, you can pretty much do what you want. You have to still choose generally a couple, like green plus maybe one other main color. But I've had a couple Sealed decks that are just 5-color green, where you're like 10 green sources and then just like one of each other basic, a couple duels and green fixing, and I'm just playing all the best cards across my pool. That can definitely happen.
How many colors would you say you're playing on average? Between 3 and 4?
Yeah, I would say like something like 3.5, because it's the way that the cards are designed and everything works in this set. It's really hard to end up 2-color with no splash.
Yes.
Just because like let's say you open 2 red-black rares and a bunch of good red and black cards. It's just still pretty likely that you're like, well, I've got an Ice Tunnel and a Volatile Fjord and a Shimmerdrift Veil. Should I splash this Bergstrider and this Behold the Multiverse? And a lot of the times it's like, well, I'm going to play these lands anyway because I want to up my snow count. So yeah, I guess I should splash here.
Yep.
So
happens a lot.
You're almost always going to be 3 or more colors. The exception is if you do end up in one of those aggro decks, because there I try pretty hard not to splash, because you don't want to be sitting around waiting on your splash color or drawing cards you can't cast. Those are just not the way that you want to be.
Right.
So once you've looked at your bombs and your fixing, and you're like, okay, I have adequate fixing and I have some good bombs. The other thing you want to look at is removal. There's a lot of good removal in this format, and a lot of it is really splashable. Like, Demon Bolt, Poison the Cup, Icebind Pillar, Bounding Gold are all super splashable removal spells. And in Sealed, we talked about bombs. You do want ways to kill your opponent's big stuff, because just more of your opponents are going to have a Svella that you have to kill. Or they're going to have a Burning Rune Demon. And it's like, this is a 6/6 flyer. If you don't kill it, you're going to really have a hard time winning this game.
Yeah. Planeswalkers, and as we said before, people play every one of those things. Like, you have to have answers for those or a plan against them. Yeah.
So basically, once you get to the point where you have that good of fixing bombs and removal, then you should be Snow, and you should end up in a spot where your goal here is to, first of all, green is basically always a pillar. Well, there's an exception, which is if you open enough land fixing it probably also takes a Replicating Ring at this point, where you end up with a Replicating Ring and 3 or 4 duels where you're like some sort of splash here that does not involve playing base green. But almost every single Snow deck is like base green, because green, there's also Spirit of the Alder Guard. It just has so much fixing. They made sure that this deck worked. And they really, really heavily went onto seeding it, and it does work. Like
it does. Yeah.
It absolutely does. The fixing's there.
Yeah. It has fixing at all rarities as well, right? It goes from even up to rare, like the World Tree and that type of stuff that can be fixing as well. It really is across the board. I mean, I don't know what happens if you open up a pool with a bunch of green and not that stuff, but generally you're going to find ways to fix, especially given the snow duels.
Yeah. So the way that you want to construct your deck is you want to play as many green cards as possible, because it's critical that you have most of your spells be cast off forests. And after that, you want to look at what are the best cards. Am I making sure I'm getting all of the best stuff? Like I'm getting Demon Bolt out of red, Bounding Gold out of white, bombs, whatever bombs or sagas you can splash. Ideally keeping those to all single color if you can. If you can't, like let's say that you have like a Cyclone Summoner, the 7 mana blue 5 giant that bounces everything that isn't a giant. I'm going to try pretty hard to get that card in my deck. It's very powerful. And this is sealed. You have enough time. At that point, I'm looking at, okay, can I make blue like a secondary color here? If I do, then cards like Mistwalker and Disdainful Stroke get more interesting, because you're trying to go into a second color. And at that point, that is the sort of thing that might make me leave out one of the other colors and be like a 4-color deck more than a 5-color deck. Because when you're in a position where you have to play 4 islands in your deck and you're going to actively search up like a second one, at that point, I try to see if I can drop white, because splashing just a Bounding Gold, maybe not going to be what I ultimately want to do.
Right.
Of course, if you have 2 white snow duels, then maybe at that point you might as well. But playing a secondary color is definitely something that happens, and definitely something that makes you change kind of what you want on your 4th and 5th colors. Because there's no intrinsic reason you have to go all 5 colors. It's just often the mana ends up, because you don't control which colors of your duels you have, you want to go 5, or you have bombs across all 5 colors, or you have stuff like Path to the World Tree, which I'm going to try pretty hard to make sure I can activate that card. It is, Cruel Ultimatum if you can.
Right.
The ideal mana base, the way I kind of build them is I put all my non-basics that I'm going to play. I put all my usually one of each basic, especially if you have snow in those basics. You don't always have to have that, but often you do, right? So that you're talking 1 island, 1 plains, 1 mountain, 1 swamp, 3 or 4 duels, a bunch of forests. I want like 9 or 10 green sources if I'm the heavy green version that has like 3 different green cards that fix my mana. And then if I still have slots because I open enough lands, I'll put in 1 or 2 of whatever the closest to my secondary color is.
Okay.
I also almost always play just about all of the good spell lands. So we're talking, like the Skemfar Elder Hall, or any of the lands that sack for an effect, or the Great Hall of Starnheim. Like you basically want to play like Yara Mirror Lake's one of the best ones, because blue-green is often the colors you are, and the Not Vold Slumberbound is also really good in Sealed, because messing with their mana base. That's the red-green one. I would prioritize basically playing all of them, except the red, white, and black red one are generally pretty medium. I don't think those ones are all that special.
Yeah, you should definitely be playing those if you have any chance to activate them. Right? I mean, they just come up. It just comes up when the games go long like that.
Yeah, and these are rewards, and I've even played. Things like the green-white land, where the only way I'm realistically activating it, because it costs white, green, is if I have glittering frost or some other like 5-color fixer that to untap with, like the Sculptor of Winter.
Yeah,
because it's just a high payoff if it does work out.
Yeah, half of 1 duel or whatever that you have 1 of in the whole thing. But these things actually add up over time for sure.
So that's basically where you're going to be at most of the time, because most of the time you're going to open good fixing, because you get a snow land in each pack, and often those are snow duels. Shimmerjiff Veil's a common, Replicating Ring is an uncommon, and then there's like a host of green fixing. Like we're talking 4 or 5 different green fixers between common and uncommon. And at that point, you get to play all the best cards. The fixing's there. What is the argument against fixing, right? You have to. It's hard to imagine not wanting to be 5-color snow, because getting to play all your best cards is appealing, and also the push snow cards like Ice-Hide Troll and Bergstrider are also really good. Like you're getting extra juice out of your common slot too. So That is often why you end up in snow. And honestly, if you just stopped here and that's all you knew how to do, you'd be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, this would cover a lot of your bases for sure. Yeah.
Obviously, we're going to continue because we want to have you be well prepared. But this is the sort of thing where it's like in draft, if you learn a couple decks, like you can draft a format even if you don't know the rest of the decks. Here, if you learn how to construct these 5-color snow decks, then you're going to end up in pretty good shape for really what you're going to experience here when you play the open or play whatever sealed deck you want to play.
Yeah, I wanted to mention as well just like a practical tip that I found for deck building, because deck building sealed on Arena is not good. It's ugly and it's hard to sort things. There's not really sorting options, and this seems to be an artifact of the fact that they'd like to have this on some type of mobile. I know that they just did Android beta or something, but that way you don't have like a whole bunch of right clicking and things like that in Arena. It's meant to be like point at, but when you're actually sitting on your computer, it's just like, well, why can't I just sort these by color or by mana cost or separate things out or whatever? And one thing I have found is, like in the example of the deck that we're doing, you can bring down all your green stuff that you think you're going to play, as well as your lands, your dual lands and your fixing and stuff. And then you can start bringing down all the things that you think you might want to be splashing. And you can even arrange them by color if you'd like, just to get an idea for maybe, okay, green's my primary color. What's my secondary? What am I splashing? Am I splashing 3 other colors? Am I green, blue based with a splash in red and a splash in black? And that way you can kind of just pull down all the cards that are candidates to have that happen and start to kind of play around with it. Now, the tricky part is that if you do this by color, then you can't put them by mana cost easily to kind of just get a vibe for what your curve looks like and all that. If you get it up to 40 cards just by adding like basics or anything to it, and you hit done, and then you go back and open up the deck again, it'll have all those down there and it automatically sorts them. So it's a kind of a hack, to get around it. But that's what I've been doing, at least in the preparation sealeds. And then one other thing that we should mention, Luis, is that you can change your deck between rounds for this tournament. Like if you play, I think we've all been there. You pour over a sealed deck until the very last second. You get it built. Then you play your first game, and right away you're just like, why am I doing, like, I should not have played this. This deck just doesn't need it. I just needed to play the other thing. After your round, you can go through and change it around how you see fit. So keep that in mind too, that, if you do find yourself in a situation where there's a card or a decision that you made that you regret, you can go back and change it.
Yeah. And I do encourage people to, text their friends about, who play Magic about the sealed pools, or I'm sure people on the LRcast subreddit will be posting theirs. Just take advantage of the fact that it's asynchronous play. You get to do that, and everyone else will.
So, are you allowed to do that? Can you do that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You indeed can talk to your friends about what sealed deck you want to play.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, so if that's going to cover, call it roughly 2/3 of the time. You mentioned the 2-color and aggro decks. What do those look like for the times when you open up your pool and let's just say your green just doesn't have it? You just didn't get the fixing you needed, or you opened up 3 snow plains or whatever, and you're just not able to put that deck together.
So the number one most important thing when it comes to an aggro deck is make sure you have enough cards that cost 2 or less. There's actually good 1-drops in the set too. Mm-hmm. You really want like 6 creatures in the 1 and 2 slot. If you don't end up with that, you're going to be mid-range, which is not the end of the world just to be mid-range in general. But if you trick yourself into thinking you're an aggro deck when you actually built a mid-range deck, you're going to get stomped by the snow decks. Because if your curve doesn't start till 3, you're just not going to pressure them enough, and they're playing 5 colors worth of good cards, and then you're playing 2 colors worth, plus you put in cheap equipment and pump spells in your deck because you're nominally aggro. And they're just going to be demon bolting your creatures and casting Feed the Serpent and casting 6 mana bombs or whatever, Ravenous Lindworms. So the most important thing is have a cheap curve. If you're able to do that, you want to back it up with, whatever removal you have. And then equipment is actually good, like Tormentor's Helm, Goldbane Pick, Raven Wings especially is quite good. And so some pump spells, like you're an aggro deck. You're actually trying to make this work. Red-white is the most common combination, but really any red, like red-white, red-black, black-white, all of these, red-black can work out. You're generally not going to be aggressive with blue or green in your deck. I actually did. It's funny. One of the practice seals I did build a white-green aggro deck just because I ended up having a bunch of good green cards to put in the deck. But for the most part, you're going to end up red base or white base with white, black, and red being the three primary colors you play with. The other colors just don't support aggro that well.
Yeah, it's weird. You bring that up. It's exactly true. One of the best decks I had was actually green-red aggro. But I had a really hard time with the build because I had a replicating ring and I had Esika as well as like a little bit of other fixing. So I basically could splash whatever I wanted. I even had the world tree, like the rare land. So like I could basically play any colors I wanted. And I just could not find the something worth splashing. I didn't have anything that was like the best thing I had an option for was a Feed the Serpent, and that's double black, and it's not really that tempting to try to splash. And everything else I had wasn't, I would have killed for a Behold the Multiverse or just anything to get in there to splash because it was basically free. And I finally just said, okay, I'm not going to play Replicating Ring in this sealed deck, which was just like, what the heck? I even pulled the World Tree. I ended up putting it back in because I could cast the backside of Esika that way pretty consistently, and I actually did. Multiple times I did, so that tap land ended up being a thing. But I replaced that fixing. I mean, I'm a little reluctant to tell you this, Luis. Just I want to still stay friends and maintain some level of respect from you. But I replaced them with Fearless Pups. I mean, like the chances that I thought I would do that. This was yesterday, by the way. This wasn't like when I was still figuring out. Like I know the format, and I still did this. And I had like 3 run amok. Like the deck was very aggressive, and it ended up working out really well. I had a Tormentor's Helm and a Raven Wings and stuff. So those pups pulled their weight, and I did well with the deck. But I mean, it shows you where the mentality is at, when I'm just like refusing to give up on these splashes and had to be kind of like dragged into it. So yeah. But with the aggro decks, I want to emphasize what you said about the curve and the combat tricks and the equipment. Those are the ways that these decks win, because the play pattern plays out that all of the cards that we just talked about for the 5, for the 3 to 5 color deck, they're slow, right? They are not a great way to develop a board. If they take turn 3 to play Replicating Ring and you smash them for 5, and then on their next turn they play a 5-drop and hope that it holds up as a blocker, and you have Run Amok, or you have your own removal spell, or anything to just get it out of the way or make your equipped creature get past it or whatever, they are under intense pressure. And you can often win the game when they have 4 spells in hand that are really good. Right. But because if you go toe to toe with those decks and just like sort of empty your hands, you're going to lose every single time. So your advantage comes from being on board first and playing, like what we talk about with like a more cab style deck, cards that affect the board state. They are going to play a lot of cards that don't. Like I play every copy of Skull Raid. I play all of that stuff, right? I'm leaning on the foretell mechanic to help me, like it's kind of like a down payment, right? Like I pay foretell when I can't cast a spell, and then when I actually get my mana together, then I cast my foretell cards. Well, foretell doesn't affect the board once again, and you have to capitalize on that stage of the game as the aggro player. If your deck can't, then you should probably try to go a different direction because you're just going to get trounced. So
yeah, and I think a really good thing to keep in mind as to why you would build an aggro deck is listen to these comparisons. If your option is to build a bad snow deck or a bad aggro deck, I mean, first of all, look, we're talking a bad pool, but you open these pools and you got to play them.
Totally.
I mean,
yeah, give me that
days,
aggro deck, dude.
At the arena open, you can actually just join again, which I know some people have mixed feelings about
depending
that.
on your financial situation. Yeah.
Yes, but I remember flying to a Grand Prix and opening a terrible pool. It's just something that happened. You took that risk. But one of the cool things, though, is the way you can increase your win percentage. The way you can get some extra value is if you assume most of your opponents are going to have decent to good snow decks, because that's going to be the case. And you have a bad snow deck, a deck you just know is lacking in the bombs department, or it doesn't have the best fixing, whatever ends up troubling it. You really don't want to be the person playing outmatched snow decks, because especially if you're the one lacking in the bombs or removal department, you're just not going to win a long game against a deck that's like that much better than yours.
Yeah. And those games go long every time. So
right. So you get max punished for not having the right the right amount of action to make it work.
Yeah. It's that kind of Mike Sigris style where like, what if we just both flipped over our decks and kind of just compared cards and said, what if we just each person got to cast everything? What would happen? And, if you just know that you're going to lose that fight basically every time, then you should really be trying to explore other options.
Yeah. And so I would rather at that point play the aggro deck, which again, maybe not your first choice, but like an average aggro deck is probably better than an average snow deck. Like if we're talking, 5 out of 10. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you can still steal wins. You can still go Battlefield Raptor into Goldbane Pick and then into the Breakneck Berserker, and then all of a sudden your opponent's dead with their good 6-mana card in their hand. And that's the sort of thing you have to keep in mind in terms of maximizing your chances. Of course, it's better just to have the great snow deck,
Yes.
I hope that's what I open.
Yes.
But you don't always get that. And when you don't get that, you have to adjust. And one of the best ways to adjust is to take away one of their big advantages of, hey, our deck's better in the late game. That's fine. I'm going to play a deck that doesn't care about the late game, that it's going to do its best to end the game as fast as possible.
Yeah. One other thing is, if you do find yourself, particularly in the situation that Luis just described, where you have kind of the medium aggro deck, you're going to have to bluff. Like, people know about Run Amok in this format. And if they play a 2/3, they play an Icehide Troll with 2, Snowlands, but they're all tapped for the turn, and you have a 2/1 Immersturm, whatever, jam it. Like, of course, not literally every time. You have to have context around your hand and other things like that. But like, if you don't, these games are going to be close, and you're going to need every bit of damage you can. And, I'll tell you, if that player is looking at their Icehide Troll, and you've got, 1 and a red up or whatever, and you send your stupid 2/1 into it and they have Snowlands already, they are not going to block it very often. That troll is a very valuable blocker for them and a very valuable card going forward. And if the situation is correct, you should at least consider the option of representing a card like Run Amok that they really want to avoid, taking extra damage and losing their troll on the same thing and sending in your creature. Particularly if your aggro deck isn't that strong. Like, you have to pick up, free damage and stuff like that. So keep that in mind as well. What about the 2-color decks? The mythical, I think I've had it twice. The
2-color decks really aren't that complicated. Mm-hmm. You end up in a 2-color deck when basically you just have like a lot of good white and black cards, and you don't really have like a strong reason not to end up splashing. You don't have the fixing. You don't have the bombs. Like, you end up with, like, let's say you opened Furio's Retribution, right? The black-white mythic saga that's just absurd. Mm-hmm. You have that. You have, like, Varagoth, the 2/3 death-touching rare with that lets you boast and put a card on top of your deck. And you've got good removal spells in both colors. And you have, like, 25 playables between black, white, and artifacts. Okay, well, you're just going to put those together. You're not trying to be a complete balls to the wall aggro deck, because your card pool gives you enough late game in black and white, and you should basically just try to build to optimize black and white. Like, mm-hmm. The 2-color decks are rare, and the good thing is you don't need much practice with them, because basically if you don't have cards worth splashing, or you don't have the fixing to enable you to splash, like, let's say you had the Time Walk, Alrund's Epiphany, which is a pretty solid card. I would always want to play it if I could. Yeah. But you have a good black-white deck and you don't have blue fixing, well, okay, you're just not going to play it. You're allowed to leave some of your good cards in your sideboard. Yeah. If you end up there, then you can build a 2-color deck. It doesn't have to be super aggressive. In fact, I'm kind of scared when I play 2-color decks against them that don't have a lot of fixing, because it makes me feel, that aren't aggro, because it makes me feel like they have a reason to just be 2 colors. Yeah, and that's how I've been. The couple of times I played 2 colors, my decks were awesome. I mean, they were consistent and really powerful because of the reason you said. I didn't need to do fixing. Also, it usually coincides with your green being particularly weak, as it turns out. Yeah, sometimes you just end up with, like, if you don't have a playable green pool, it's going to be hard to be 3 or 5 colors, because the lands in Replicating Ring can only get you so far. Right.
Okay, so let's look at some other sort of sealed specific things. If you're good on talking about the sort of the three major pillars of the format there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so one big question that I got quite a bit on my stream because people saw me doing this was, do you main deck naturalized style effects? Things that destroy artifacts, enchantments, that kind of stuff. And the answer is yeah, you do. And I kind of broke it down here. Invoke the Divine, that's the white one. You'll usually find targets, and I'll play my first one basically every time, and the second one sometimes. But Broken Wings is on another level. I think I would just play 2 of these just straight up, like without even thinking about it. Mainly because some of the bombs have flying in the format, right? I mean, you mentioned Furia's Retribution, right? Like, a Broken Wings killing the angel breaks that up pretty good. Right. And then you mentioned the demon, and then there's all these angels flying around, these other ones. There's some flyers in blue, and Broken Wings just kills those, but then also gets you the ability to hit, a Bound in Gold or a Key Saga or something like that as well.
Yeah. Broken Wings is fantastic. I would always play 1, almost always play 2 if you don't have that much removal. And even if you have like a middling amount, 2 is still probably fine. Mm-hmm. And then it just ends up being a fantastic card. The only reason that I think you play Invoke a little less is because I'm usually not base white unless I'm aggressive, or at least I try not to be.
Right.
And those decks can't really just jam Invoke, I don't think. Because
that's actually very true. And you're not splashing for it. So that is true. It doesn't actually play out that way in practice very often.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I think that Invoke is going to end up not being in your deck all that often, but it is a fine card to play in your deck if you need to.
Yeah. And then one thing that comes up with these Broken Wings and others like this too is, I don't know, I'm sure you've been on the bad end of this, but I've had it where, I had a Shimmering Frost or a ring, and my opponent used a Broken Wings or something similar on a different card. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, if they would have taken out my mana fixing, I just can't cast anything here,
Yeah. It's hard to know when to do that, though, because
it's very difficult. Yeah.
Using a spell to destroy a land has historically not been a very effective plan in Sealed.
That's right.
Or in Limited in all, because if the game goes on long enough, you didn't accomplish almost anything. But yeah, you can definitely get people sometimes with that.
I just feel like people are leaning on Shimmering Frost for both to up their snow count and to fix their mana quite a bit. So I'm a little more apt to do it, particularly depending on what the rest of their mana looks like. Speaking of similar, Masked Vandal, I just play 2 of these, no problem. The card's just awesome. Yeah.
Masked Vandal's great because you almost always have some sort of synergy with the fact if it's not the explicit thing that your deck is doing, you have like a Glimpse of the Cosmos or something. And it also works really nicely with Raise the Draugr, a card which I've found to be pretty good in Sealed.
Yep.
And then, of course, the Disenchant effect is also quite strong.
Yeah. There are a couple others that people might wonder. Smashing Success is the red one. No, I would not start them. But I do think it's reasonable to keep it in mind as something from your sideboard in case there's something that pops up that you have a really difficult time dealing with, like a Cosmos Elixir, or if your opponent's mana does feel spread too thin and you can nab the land that has Glittering Frost on it, then you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 out of it. That might be worth it. Even then, it's still edge case. So I would be very careful with Smashing Success. And then there's Annul. And to that, I say no.
Annul's terrible. So yeah, when they have bombs like Cosmos Elixir, which ended up being an A+, then yeah, you'd
just going to slide that one in there. All right.
But let's also talk some more individual cards because there's some meaningful differences in Sealed. Disdainful Stroke is great. If you're base blue, I would play 2 of these easily.
Same. It's been so good in Sealed. It's so much better for whatever reason. I guess just because you face the aggro decks that much less often.
Well,
but
I also think it's actually underrated in Draft.
Yeah, it is a little, right? Because it hits a bunch of the Foretell stuff.
Right. And you can even sometimes they're on the play and they go turn 2 Foretell and you just play your second land and pass and you Disdainful Stroke their Packmate and it's just absurd.
Yes, I agree. And here it's even a significant step better because of the speed of the format or lack thereof.
Yeah. I like it a lot. you have the world tree it's a rare, but you should basically always play it. It's just such good fixing.
It's the rare that it's really one of the best fixers. Yeah, it just absolutely makes absurd.
All your lands pop off. Raven Wings is pretty good. It ends up being a card that's really good in board stalls. So I think you'll play it more often than in draft, though. Like even in a mid-range deck, I'd play it. I would probably try to avoid playing it in my snow decks unless I had a lot of creatures for some reason.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. You do want a high creature count to make cards like that good, because it does make anything with like 2 power or above good, like a reasonable threat that they have to deal with at some point. So that's worth it. But if you have a whole lot of your slots dedicated to fixing and removal and stuff like that, and you could find yourself in a board state where you don't really have anything to put the wings on, that's a disaster. I mean, that is, now you're down a full card in addition. So make sure you have a decent creature count. But I agree, even in mid-range decks, I'm quite happy with it. Not just aggro.
Yeah. I like Search for Glory a lot more than you would expect. This is the snow sorcery for 2 and a white.
Oh.
Just because it goes and gets a snow permanent, a legendary card, or a saga, which means you almost always have something to get. And usually something really good to get.
It might be one of your
Plus, it'll gain
cards.
you a couple life sometimes. So that's a card I found myself splashing for in those 5-color decks.
Interesting. So you will actually splash for it then?
Yeah, if I have something that's appropriately strong to get.
Okay. That's cool.
The big green creatures at common, the Elvish Outrider and the Lindworm are both great. You should basically play all the copies of them you can.
Yeah, at first I thought I was
as well.
Yeah, at first I thought I was playing those to accommodate the fact that I wanted to be in green. Like that I was just like, well, I want to be green and these are playable, so I'll just put them in the deck. But the more I played them, even in sealed, I'm like, these are just good. Like they just do their job, and they're common, so you can kind of pick them up, in a bunch of pools, relatively easily. Lindworm particularly,
the Lindworm's really good. The living equipment's also really good. So we're talking like Dwarven Hammer, the Draugr equipment, Draugr's Helm. All 5 of the living equipment is good because they give you a good piece of board presence, and then they also give you just a really good long-term effect where you're going to play Draugr's Helm. They'll deal with the 4/4, and then you equip it on your 2/2, and you have a 4/4 menace all of a sudden. So, I mean, look, you're going to see a kind of recurring theme here, which is cards that are slow tend to be better in sealed. And that's just something that's been true of sealed basically throughout history.
It's true. And particularly these type of cards, Luis and I, you won't find us recommending playing equipment that often in sealed deck, right? Generally, it goes down. But these have, of course, the main upfront advantage that Luis mentioned of getting you some board presence when you cast them and can pay the extra cost to make the token. So that way you don't give up, all of the stuff that you normally do. But there's a critical element here as well, which is that it's a mana sink. And it is often the case that in sealed, there's somewhat of a stall out where people use their best removal on their best opponent's best threats. And then you kind of have some leftovers. And if one of your leftovers is one of these equipment and you can just throw it on any old creature and make it into a legitimate anything. Same thing goes with the Raven Wings that we mentioned. Now you have something to do with your mana and your opponent may have ran out, right? They have a creature sitting there that can't attack or block because let's say it's a 3/3 and it's outclassed either direction. Well, if you had one of these equipments, you also got a creature out of it. Admittedly, it was slightly overpriced, but only a little bit. And then you had your creature. If it died or got bounced or whatever, well, you have this mana sink left over, and that can easily be the difference between winning a long game or not. And, there's not that many mana sinks in this format with regards to like just places to put your mana and generate board or card advantage. And these actually give you a makeshift way to do that, assuming you have any type of board state around.
Yeah, I would prioritize them, and in general, they're worth splashing. Like you could end up in a spot where you splash the white one and you're going to be pretty happy. You get a 6/5 flyer.
Yeah, and you should be aware of some of them have colorless, like the for example the green one, right? You have to pay the extra mana, but it's generic mana. And some of them have an extra color in their cost, like the blue one or whatever. So it's actually double blue to get the creature out of it. So, some are more splashable than others. Of course, you always have the backup plan of just playing it and equipping it if you can't find the second color. So maybe not the end of the world, but you should be aware of that too before you put them in the deck. How often am I going to have double blue to get this giant, token?
Yeah. I love the blue card draw. Behold and Glimpse are worth splashing for, nearly bomb level cards.
They're absurd in sealed. And I thought they couldn't get better than they are in the draft format, where we already have them at like B plus range, and they're somehow better.
Yeah, they just give you all the tools you need to win, and everyone has so many good cards that just drawing more of them and having some selection is just going to be really powerful.
I mean, it's demoralizing when you kind of have like a close game going and then they go Behold on your end step and you're just like, can't win. Sure, I guess you have one of those. It feels like when they play some mythic bomb that you can't answer, you're just like, well, I can't beat that ever, because everybody has access to such powerful stuff. And as we know, card draw equals mana fixing. That's been proven by science. So, yeah. Another thing to be aware of too is that, you don't see planeswalkers very often in draft. But in sealed, you'll see them a little bit more often because people will really try hard to play any planeswalkers that they open. Where, if you open a gold planeswalker in draft, you may not get to play it, etc. Many cards actually, they've recently had a shift, over the last few years in R&D at Wizards, where cards can target planeswalkers in addition to creatures. Most things can, in fact. Cards like Feed the Serpent can exile planeswalkers, right? Squash, Demon Bolt, those can target planeswalkers. Even Jarl, the Forsaken or whatever, that guy can finish off a planeswalker that took some damage, right? And so, these are narrow corner cases that aren't going to define the sealed format, but you should be aware of it because, if you've been playing for a while, you may not realize that a lot of your cards actually interact with planeswalkers, and you may face down a Tibalt or something and be able to take it out a lot easier than you think. It's
funny. I actually learned that today during my sealeds where I was like, oh, Jarl does hit, opposing Tibalts and stuff like that. So,
and it's when does that come up, right? It's so narrow,
Yeah, always a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Another sort of general tip that I wanted to remind people of, particularly for this format, is to read all your cards. Just go a little slower and just double check, because this is the most complex set we've really ever had. That's a normal expert level set, and sealed shifts the sort of available card pool by a little bit, meaning that you're going to see a few cards that you may not see in draft very often. And if you just assume that you know what they all do, you may be wrong. And taking an extra 5 seconds to double check all the rules of text and everything to make sure that you know exactly what's going to happen can really benefit you. Because I've had a few scenarios come up in sealed that I had never had in draft yet. And I'm going, I don't actually know how this works. I had the 4/4 zombie guy that when their stuff dies, it gets exiled with the ice counters on it, and I had a couple of questions. One of them was, well, if he dies and I have some stuff that I never got to cast with the ice counters, if I buy him back later, does he see the cards with ice counters? And the answer is, yeah, he does. All he cares about is that it has an ice counter on it. Okay, well, that's good to know. Also, if he dies alongside other creatures, they all get exiled, but you can't cast him because he's not on the battlefield anymore. But their stuff still gets exiled, so you can do it later. But also, if they were gonna, Draugrs return these things back or whatever, they can't. Those cards are actually exiled. And knowing that before you enter combat, could be the difference. And so, you have a little extra time here, to just double check the cards as you go. And I highly recommend doing so. Also, I made a quick list of the creatures with flash, just because, you should be aware of those before you go into combat, basically, which are Brine Barrow Intruder, which is the blue 1/2 that you won't see very often in sealed. But at the rare slot, there's Cosmos Charger. That's a 3/3 flyer in blue. Glorious Protector, which can be cast for as little as 2 and a white at instant speed with flash and flying. There's Jarl that we mentioned, and there's Sigrid, which is the 1 white. Another good option, thing for that is the rules on Sigrid, right? if you flash in Sigrid and target a thing and they kill Sigrid, the thing never gets exiled and it's still attacking, right? Good to know, right? You may want to know that, so that you understand the timing of it. And then, technically Mists and Undersea Invader have flash, but, Mist doesn't really count and Undersea Invader doesn't affect combat. So I didn't put on the list.
Yeah. So another card, or class of cards which get better is discard spells. So Skull Raid and Elderfang Disciple specifically.
I just play all of them.
Yeah, just play them all. There's even no drawback on Skull Raid. It gets your cards one way or another. People just have more expensive cards in their hand. And look, the reason that we like aggro, if your pool can build it, is listen to everything we're saying here.
Right.
It is correct to play Disdainful Strokes and Skull Raids in your deck, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to fix my mana with Replicating Ring. The 1, 2, 3 draws out of aggro really want you to have as many Skull Raids as possible.
Yes, please keep foretelling things and spending 4 mana that doesn't do anything. And exactly. One little tip too that I thought was relevant about Skull Raiding cards like that I heard you talk about actually on your stream today was kind of the timing on when to cast them, right? Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I agreed 100% with what you said, but I think that people get a little too narrowed down on when they want to cast those cards.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of like those the things where level 1 is cast it when you draw it, or when you have the mana open, when it just when it would fit in your curve. Mm-hmm. Level 2 is I'm going to wait to cast this to get their last 2 cards. Mm-hmm. Level 3 is just cast it when you can.
Yes, exactly. And go ahead.
I just think that. Yes, it is generally more effective to score them when they have 2 cards than 4, but I'm not going to pass my turn without spending mana if this is what I have to do as my play. It's just generally not worth that. It's not that big of a difference. That being said, if it's one of the cool things about Skull Raid is it does have foretell. So foretelling Skull Raid and playing a 3-drop on turn 5 when they have 4 cards in hand to set up Skull Raid when they've got 3 or 2 cards in hand is going to be pretty nice.
Yeah. So keep that in mind as you go through as well. Another category of card worth mentioning here, Luis, are the sweepers, right? People are going to be playing every one of these if they get in there really, really good. The 2 premium ones are Doomscar and Blood on the Snow because they just kill everything basically. And Blood on the Snow particularly gets something back right away. And Doomscar is so cheap that you can do it and then play a card a lot of the time. So those are ones where you're way ahead in a game. And you have to ask yourself, do I need to cast this last creature from my hand? Like, does this actually change the clock? Is there a real reason for me to cast this? Now, sometimes there are. You don't want to necessarily play around cards that you haven't seen from your opponent and that you don't have any indication that they could have. It often is incorrect to do so and can lead to losses. But if all things equal, you have lethal over 4 creatures and basically the only thing that can get them out of it is playing a card like Doomscar or something like that. If a Bergstrider won't get it done for them, then you can keep that last creature in your hand and afford to play around a full-on sweeper like that.
You also should look at what clues they have. Like, are they playing in a way that's suspicious? Mm-hmm. Is what they're doing, does that make sense does their behavior make more sense if they have a sweeper in hand? So definitely something to keep in mind. And the sweepers also are all very good. Like you want all these cards in your deck. Your opponents are going to, jump through hoops to try to make sure they can play Blood on the Snow or Battle of Frost and Fire in their deck because the cards are so powerful. Right.
There's also Crippling Fear. And then to a much lesser extent, and probably only if you're like the white aggro deck, there's Crush the Weak. So be aware of those, right? Battle of Frost and Fire usually clears the board. Crippling Fear often does. Doomscar and Blood on the Snow basically always do. So these are cards that you will see cast. So they won't happen every game, but if you just blindly play forward and are willing to just say, well, if they have it, they have it, and not really put any critical thought into it, you're going to get punished by this at some point over the course of the event. If you are willing to put the time in and accept the risks, then sometimes you say, hey, if they have it, and that's okay. I don't see a better way to proceed, and they have it. Well, then you can live with it. But if you get caught completely offhand by one of these where you're just like, oh my God, that's on you. Like if you could have looked back and said, if I just would have thought about that card, I would have played differently. It didn't cost me anything to play differently, then, that's on you. So just be aware of them, because again, in sealed, people are going to work really, really hard to play all of the sweepers, the bombs, and the removal that they open up.
So, another card which I have found to overperform in sealed is Run Ashore, the instant for 4 blue to bounce a non-land permanent to hand and bounce a non-land permanent to top of library. So, or bottom if they want. The reason I think this card is good is there's a lot of negative auras or removal that your opponent's going to play, and the auras especially because they just sit there, where you can set up Run Ashore, targeting your own creature to bounce to hand and one of theirs to bounce to library.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up being a really effective card for 6 mana.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because you kind of get to shore up the issue that it has. I mean, it's a powerful effect to have, but it doesn't have foretell and it costs 6 mana. So in a draft format that's more streamlined, that's a big cost to pay. But here, where things are slowed down, and a lot of the times you're going to be in that match that we've been describing about the 2 kind of 3 to 5 color decks battling it out. Well, now you actually have the time to let a card like that flex, right? It actually gets to have its effect on the game a lot more often than it would, given the speed of decks that you're likely to face. So yeah, I found the exact same thing, that I can basically make that into a 2-for-1 every time. Sometimes you just nab the token that came from one of these equipment or something like that. So you're effectively killing a creature off the board. That happens a decent amount as well. So, and like you said, you can buy back one of your things or whatever with all the ETB effects. What about Raise the Draugr?
Yeah, so Raise the Draugr, this is the one in a black instant. It's actually important that it's an instant because these effects usually aren't. Returns any creature or 2 creatures that share a type from your graveyard to your hand. Mm-hmm. And I have found some good success in even splashing this because what'll often happen is you'll have some like really high value creatures a lot of the times, right? You'll end up with an extra an extra way to get back one of your bombs, like a Cyclone Summoner or Immerstorm Predator, though that one doesn't go to the graveyard so much because of how hard it is to kill.
Right. Usually just ends the game, but yeah.
Or like they killed one of your Avalanche Colors or something like that early, and that card's really strong later. Mm-hmm. And then you also have enough shapeshifters. Just the average snow deck is going to have like 1 or 2. You're going to have a Masked Vandal or something along those lines. And those can always kind of like come along for the ride. Plus, if you're base green, for example, you'll have 3 elves in your deck without even really trying, or warriors. Like Horizon Seeker and Eyesight Troll are both warriors. Sometimes you just get back both of those. So I've liked Raise the Draugr quite a bit. And in that vein, Draugr Recruiter, the 4 mana 3/3 that has Boast 3 and a black to return a creature to your hand, also fine. Now, not as good, but still a card you can consider put in your deck when I generally try to avoid it.
Yep, same. I mean, it often will play out similarly to how I described the Horizon Seeker, where somebody's willing to just attack, throw away basically their 3/3, but get back their best card. They get back some big demon or angel or game winning whatever with it. And, and then there's also times when your opponent ends up having to trade for the 3/3, and then you just feel like you're killing it, even if it's a fairly inefficient card at all levels, really. Yeah, the Draugr's Return also kind of interesting in that you wouldn't normally think of splashing a 2 mana card, and you think, well, I don't want to splash for that, but it's an turn 8 play, a turn 10 play anyway. So it'll line up with when you finally get the splash mana that you need for it is when you want to cast it anyway. So that works out really nice.
Yeah, and I have found it to be a card that really gives you some extra punch in the late game. It's especially good if your creatures or your bombs are your creatures. So when you do have a deck that's constructed where some of your best cards are creatures, it gets even better. So if your bombs are more of the like sagas or non-creatures, then it's of course less important.
I wish there was a mill card in the format. I feel like it would be so busted in the sealed if you could, folio of fancies people out or whatever. Just like
that would be really good. One card I do want to mention, which I'm loath to mention, is Raven Form.
Yeah.
So this is a tuna blue sorcery that exiles an artifact or creature, and they get a 1/1 bird with flying. Look, this card is still not good. It's still like not really where you want to be. But if you're lacking in removal, it can actually do the job. So. I'm still not thrilled about playing the card, but I am more likely to play it in sealed than I am in draft.
Yeah, I feel the same way. People just have to have it categorized correctly, right? It's a necessary evil. right? It's a card that you play because you don't have very many other options. And ultimately, they cast a 6/6 demon. You're going to lose to that. You have a couple of Mistwalkers in your deck, so you can block the 1/1 token or mitigate it. Sure, you do what you got to do. All right. Anything else?
The last thing I wanted to cover was some of the cards are basically that I would consider just about mandatory to put in your deck if you open them.
Okay.
Just so people don't leave these on the sidelines. Not that they're super likely to, but it's worth highlighting. Starnheim Unleashed, the white mythic that makes X Angels. The Foretells XX single white. I really can't imagine not putting this card in my deck. It's just way too strong.
I think it's the best card in the format. Yeah.
Yeah, it's most frequently going to be 5 or 7 mana, in which case it makes 2 Angels very early or 3 Angels in the middle of the game, and neither of those are particularly beatable. For blue, the only card that really fits into this vein is probably Alrund, God of the Cosmos, but he's double blue, so you're not always going to play him, though he is very strong. Same with Cosima, the God of the Voyage, also very strong, but again, not a card that you want on the splash as much. Black has 2 of the best. Valky, God of Lies / Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter. You'd have to drag me like kicking and screaming to not play this card if I open this. I'm white-red aggro? Okay, well, I'm going to play a Shimmer Veil and a black land, and I'm going to try to splash this card. Yeah. You just win the game if it resolves. I would say too high of a percentage of the time to not include it. Likewise, Turgid, God of Fright, that flips into the Lantern.
So good.
The Lantern is just unbeatable. Like I had an opponent play one when I was at 20, and I just conceded the game a turn later.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't have a way to kill it in my deck. It just was a deck that didn't have an artifact removal spell. I'm not getting this game over with anytime soon, and they're just going to chew up my life total than all my cards.
Yep. That's exactly been my experience. That card is – and Turgid on the front is also amazing. Like, there's all these random things that happen that you don't really think of, and the cards start going over to their side of the board, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that was going to happen.
Did you know if you play Turgid, God of Fright, and your opponent takes a saga up to its 3rd chapter and then sacrifices it, you just get the saga?
Oh my, are you serious? And it just starts over on your side? Oh,
yes.
That's gross. I haven't even had that happen. That's sick.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing that'll happen when you have Turgid. For green, Isika's Chariot is really hard for me to want to leave on the sideboard. This is just, the 3 and a green 4/4 that makes 2 cats and then clones things. Also, one note with the Chariot, you don't have to attack with it. Like I had a game earlier where I left up mana for Isika's Chariot or to a removal spell, and my opponent just activated and attacked. Oh. And it's like, you're allowed to not attack with it. So your opponent, if they leave up removal and it seems pretty obvious to you that that's what's happening, just don't play into their hands. For the sagas, it's really hard to imagine leaving Binding the Old Gods or Battle of Frost and Fire, but those multicolor cards have a little bit of leeway. Look, if your 2 best colors are like white and blue or like, red and green, like I could see not playing the like double off color sagas. It's just sometimes it just won't work out the way you want.
Yeah, for sure.
Kaya, the Inexorable, and Coma, Cosmo Serpent. Do what you need to do, but get these cards in your deck.
Yeah, for sure. Coma's just unbeatable.
One thing that actually really changes between draft and sealed is Waking the Trolls goes from, I think, being good in draft. Against most opponents, it's quite strong, to just being a bomb-worthy splash in sealed. I would just do my hardest to play this card.
It's so good in the mirror, right? Like you can blow up a land that has Glittering Frost or just a key duel or whatever, and then it acts as a win condition. It fixes your mana a lot of the time. That card's that like I don't know just on power level, but that's the card I most want to see when I open my pool, just because I love it.
So there are other bombs and rares that are good. This isn't an exhaustive list of them, but these are the cards that like I would really go out of my way to try to play.
Okay. Well, you feel prepared for the weekend? I know this is the biggest tournament of your career.
Yeah, I am definitely ready. I just have to find out if it's allowed to have multiple arena accounts and play day 2 with all of them.
Oh God. Yeah. One of my friends, I was on a call with earlier asked, well, what's the prizes? And I said, literally thousands of dollars, right? It's like, it meets a requirement for the plural of thousands of dollars if you do the thing. So there you go. Good luck to everybody. This is a really cool thing. And I also just want to remind people that I think just partaking in this tournament at all is a positive thing. It's a way to vote with your wallet, basically, to show Wizards of the Coast that us limited players still matter, that we care about this stuff, that we have, we're willing to spend our time and money, if they support limited, which by the way, they have, right? They got human drafting last year. They clearly care about it, but I like making that voice real loud to them that, hey, this still matters, that this is the best way you have to play your game. And even though the barrier to entry is a little higher, there's a big group of people here that are very, very passionate about this. And so I'm excited to cast my vote, if you will, this weekend. And hopefully I'll do well, as well. But really, I'm just excited that it exists. I mean, that to me is the coolest part, because I'd like to see this for draft, right? I want to keep going with this. And, if we can get out there and show them how good this, sealed and limited is received as on one of these arena opens, I think that'll inspire them to keep going forward with developing and putting the resources necessary to get things like an all draft arena open together. So show us your pools. No, we're not going to be going over everybody's pool to fix it or whatever, but we'd love to see them. And good luck. Hopefully everybody opens well. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and he is LSV. And that's probably the best place to catch up with us there with how you're doing. And particularly if you make day 2, show us your pool. I'm just curious to see what kind of stuff made it through on average. That would be a cool thing. And hopefully you open up a bunch of sweet mythics and the mana fixing to cast all of them. I want to mention our sponsor channel, Fireball, again. A lot of what we talked about here on the show, Luis has in written form on CFB Pro. And as we talked about before, this is, a premium content for players who are really serious, who are really trying to up their game and get to that next level. You can check out the pricing structures on CFB Pro. It's very affordable. It's not bad at all. You can go to channelfireball.com/pro, and there's a link in the show notes for that as well, if you're interested in signing up. And as I mentioned before, if you do get anything over at CFB, if you would use the, affiliate code LR, that helps out the show, and we appreciate you doing that. That is going to do it for this one. Good luck this weekend. We'll see you next week.
So, I don't normally participate in various Twitter memes. I find them to be mostly kind of annoying. But there was one going around that I actually did, which was someone was like, quote tweet this with a deck that meant a lot to you in some event you played or anything like that, right?
Oh, I saw that. Like from like an old school, like from a back in the day and stuff was what people were doing, right?
Exactly. And so the deck I tweeted out was this blue-white Mind's Desire deck from Extended. So Extended was kind of before Modern, but it was like, the last 10 years of cards, but not all the broken cards. Mm-hmm. And it was the first constructed PTQ I ever won, the second PTQ total I ever won. And then it's funny, that same season, David Ochoa Webb, he won a PTQ the next weekend with the same deck. And then Paul Chian actually won a PTQ with the same deck as well.
Wow. What deck was this? I didn't see your tweet.
So this is a blue-white Mind's Desire deck. And the way this deck worked, it had a Sapphire Medallion and Cloudscape Familiar. So that's the 1 and a white 0/3 and also the 2-mana artifact, both of which says your blue spells cost 1 less.
Mm-hmm.
So what the deck does is it's able to play a bunch of blue spells that untap its lands. So it's got Cloud of Fairies, which is a 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, untap 2 lands. Mm-hmm. Snap, which is a 1 and a blue, bounce target creature, untap 2 lands. And so imagine you have a Sapphire Medallion out and you go Cloud of Fairies for 1 mana, untap 2 lands, plus 1 mana. Mm-hmm. Snap for 1 mana, untap 2 lands, plus 2 mana now. Return Cloud of Fairies, play it, now up 3 mana. Mm-hmm. And so it generates a bunch of spells with Snaps and Cloud of Fairies. It can use Cunning Wish as well. Which can go get more ways to untap. And then it has Turnabout, which is, the 2 and 2 blue, untap all your lands, mm-hmm. which also, once you have these cost reduction effects, goes off. And then the way it wins is it casts a Mind's Desire usually to flip a bunch more stuff. And then a Brain Freeze, either off Cunning Wish or there's 2 Brain Freeze in the deck and then 2 in the sideboard to wish for. And
sweet.
The deck was so sweet. Like it had a bunch of accumulated knowledges. It had deep analysis. I mean, this deck was right up my alley, as you can imagine.
Yeah, this sounds like a very Luis. I suppose cards like High Tide and Gush weren't legal.
No, those weren't legal, but you could play all this untapping stuff, and
sweet. You guys won PTQs with this thing?
Yeah, it was such a good deck, and this was this was back when like Extended had some pretty broken stuff going on, but this deck had so much good play to it. I remember playing against a white-blue aggro deck that they had gone Meddling Mage naming Mind's Desire, Meddling Mage naming Cunning Wish, and Meddling Mage naming Brain Freeze. Right?
Wow. Okay.
And they had Mother of Runes in play, so they could tap their Mother of Runes to give their own creatures protection from any color. So I couldn't even snap their mother.
That's insane. You can't snap their mages. Yeah. Wow.
So what I did is I turnabouted them, tapping their Mother of Runes, so I could then snap one of their mages, which then let me go off from there.
Oh, that's insane. That's awesome.
It also had Intuition, which is the 2 and a blue, search for three cards, and then they put one in your hand and the other 2 in the graveyard. So the old combo was you Intuition for Accumulated Knowledge, which draws you more cards for each copy in the graveyard. But my favorite was always Intuition for 2 Deep Analysis plus Flash of Insight. Those all have flashback, and Flash of Insight was you could flash it back for 1 and a blue and then exile as many blue cards as you wanted and let you look at that many cards and put 1 in your hand.
From on top of your library? Okay.
Yeah, so basically it had a ton of ways to draw cards, a ton of ways to do cool things, and it was a Storm combo win. It was basically everything I want out of Magic, right?
And it was mono blue?
It was blue-white.
It was blue-white. Okay.
It was splashing white for Sunscape Familiar. That was basically the only white card.
Wow.
But I remember that PTQ, I got to play like the mirror in the finals of the PTQ. And the way Accumulated Knowledge works is 1 and a blue, draw a card, then draw 1 for every Accumulated Knowledge in graveyards. Counted your opponent's graveyard. And the AK battle, you didn't want to blink first because if you cast yours first, then theirs would draw off yours and you would get a massive advantage.
Of course. Oh, that's incredible. What a crazy matchup.
So I remember playing this deck, tuning it. I have a very distinct memories. This is back when I was going to college in Davis, which is about an hour and a half away from the Bay. And there was this train that went from Davis to the Bay and vice versa into Emeryville. And this is before like smartphones, and there was no internet connection on the train. And so what I did is I would just goldfish this deck. I would just sit there and I would play out game after game with the deck. And the reason I did that, well, first of all, I enjoyed doing it. Second, it gave me a good sense of which hands could go off when. Sometimes I'd be like, all right, I'm going to try to go off turn 3 with this hand. And then you fizzle. You know, and you get a sense that, okay, the key point I found was about 5. If you could cast Mind's Desire for 5, you were pretty consistently going off from that position.
I see. And you had a really good sense for what was safe and what was risky and what wouldn't work at all.
Right. And then like figuring out other little tricks and like ways to just optimize the deck and optimize like your sequencing and ways to just get the most out of your cards. And it worked to Goldfish because this was a deck that you didn't really need an opponent for. Obviously it changes when you have an opponent, but it's not like you can't Goldfish Jund. You're like, all right, turn 1 I cast Inquisition. Turn 2 I cast Tarmogoyf. Turn 3 I guess I cast Liliana because I don't have an opponent. I don't know what you're doing.
Right.
You know? So
that's fun.
I felt, I mean, this is the first deck I felt mastery over. This is the first deck where I felt like I know everything that's going on in every matchup. And, well, I mean, we had an obscenely good record at this time. Of course, this is also back when, like, in general, people played a lot of weird stuff. Like, just the average Magic player wasn't as good. But yeah, I think that probably walking into that tournament, I was, you know, maybe the most likely person to win that tournament or at least close to it. I think based on how much practice and effort I put into it.
Yeah, that's not something you'll get very often now.
No, I don't think. I think that it's just Magic's gotten harder, and I don't know. I love playing that deck. It was one of the things that kind of made me start to love tournament Magic. That was a big part of it.
That's awesome.